This is the regime change crowd. This is the coup crowd. And they're still trying to pull off a coup in the United States. And, Joe Biden was the point man for this in the Obama administration. The story is now coming out that Brennan was working on the Russiagate story at the end of 2015 when Trump first got into the campaign.
Friends, before we begin, just a quick thank you to this interview's sponsor, the Patriot Solar Bank. With all of the power outages and PG&E fires in California, it's easy to see why it's important to have your own power bank for your phone and electronics. Never waste money on batteries again because it's solar powered. And with a dual USB port, you can charge 2 devices at once. You can charge your cell phone anywhere in the world with the Patriot Solar Bank. It's lightweight, extremely durable, compact, and easy to take with you anywhere you go. Again, features include solar-powered recharging, dual USB ports, 8,000 mAh battery, LED lamp illumination, USB cable, and detachable compass. The Patriot Solar Bank is the perfect gift, but this is the last of the 2019, so get one today before they're gone. Use promo code SGT20 to save 20% off your order. Just visit patriotsolarbank.com. The link is below this video. Okay, friends, let's begin. Thank you so very much for tuning in. This broadcast is an important one. You're going to want to share it with your friends, family, colleagues. We're going to talk about the impeachment hearings and the frame-up job against our president, Donald J. Trump. We're also going to talk about the incredibly unjust conviction of Roger Stone. Joining me right now is our good friend, Harley Schlanger. Harley, welcome.
Hi, Sean. How you doing?
Hanging in there. So much to talk about. I cannot even believe that, well, I can believe it. Roger Stone has been convicted. And in a second, I want to play a soundbite of righteous indignation for you that I shared over on Twitter. It comes from Terrence K. Williams via Twitter. What did you make of Roger Stone's conviction?
Well, this is more of the same injustice, and it's not going to stop until the coup plotters are put away. Roger's crime was that he helped draft the strategy that led to Trump's victory. And the people who are going after Donald Trump will not forgive people like Stone, Manafort, Flynn, the real patriots who are fighting for the nation. And I can only say that, Roger's frame-up was done precisely in the same kind of FBI sting operation and setup that was used against Flynn and against Manafort. And this is the long-term approach, prosecutorial approach used by the FBI, which, if you look at it, this is what they've learned from studying the Stasi in East Germany and the Gestapo under the Nazis. How to frame people up, how to intimidate them, how to rig juries. This is the same MO that was used against Lyndon LaRouche. And I can only pray that Roger has the strength to fight this thing through. And I certainly hope that at some point he'll be given a pardon and we'll have the gag order lifted so we can hear from him.
You know what, Harley? I think we all hope that President Trump will just give Stone a pardon. Let me play this for you. It's a soundbite from Terrence K. Williams. I don't know if I'll play the whole thing. It's 1 minute and 15 seconds. But he posted this on Twitter. I retweeted it saying, righteous indignation.
So they done locked up Roger Stone. But when are they going to lock her up? When is Hillary Clinton going to jail for the crimes that she committed? Half of America is waiting on this woman to go to jail for the crimes that she committed. This dirty, crooked old woman deleted over 33,000 classified emails. Not 3 classified emails. No. Not just 30 classified emails, 33,000 classified emails. And then they say Roger Stone is going to jail for lying to Congress. When is Hillary Clinton going to jail for lying to Congress? That woman got on national TV and lied to America and lied to Congress.
I'll pause it there. Righteous indignation. I tell you, more and more Americans are feeling, more than half the country feels that exact same way.
Well, and that's a proper indignation. I mean, you can just draw up a list of people who got away with lying to Congress. What about Brennan? What about James Clapper? These were people whose lies were admitted. Clapper himself came out afterwards and claimed he misspoke. Well, Roger said the same thing. He said that he said a couple of things that were not exactly what the FBI expected him to say. What about Clapper? What about Brennan? So, we see a justice system that serves the interests of the powerful and the corrupt. And that's why the righteous indignation is not only justified, but if we don't get justice, there's going to be hell to pay for it.
Well, and I also saw an article saying that the population from which the jury pool was selected in Stone's case, 90% of that population voted for Hillary. So you want to talk about a stacked deck. It's like the same stacked deck we see over in Congress, with at least one decent Democrat congressman saying the whole process of this impeachment, these hearings, reminds him of third world nations. Let me play this soundbite for you from Jeff Van Drew, Democrat, New Jersey.
De Tocqueville in 1853 wrote that if a nation was more and more often using, and I'm paraphrasing, impeachment as a way of actually removing its leaders, it showed the deterioration of the nation. This has nothing to do whether you like Donald Trump or don't like him or want to see him have a second term or win an election. This has to do with the institution of impeachment itself and not misusing it. It is so rarely used, should be rarely used. And as I've mentioned to you before, it is something that during the hundreds of years of American history has never been successfully used. There's a reason for that, Maria. There's a reason. There's a reason our founding fathers didn't really, many of them didn't want it in the Constitution and debated and battled back and forth whether it should be in the Constitution.
The problem with impeachment, Harley, is it's being used as a weapon, and it's never been more clear. If you look at the behavior of Adam Schiff, absolutely despicable. I have a soundbite I want to play for you in a little bit here from Representative Elise Stefanik, New York Republican. Boy, is she all over this thing. Same with Representative Jim Jordan. The truth is out. Everybody can see it. If you're paying attention to these hearings, you know it's nothing more than a third world circus.
Well, there's a deeper truth that still needs to come out. And I think the Republicans are soft pedaling it so far. And the real question is, what is Ukraine? How did Ukraine get into the center of this? And, if you look at the personnel involved, the march of the diplomats in to testify against Trump, these are operatives of the deep state. William Taylor, they say he's so upstanding and courageous and what a good diplomat. Taylor was the coordinator of U.S. aid to the former Soviet bloc. That means he was there in the 90s when Russia was looted by Wall Street and London banks. And the oligarchs were able to build up huge fortunes. Taylor was overseeing that for the United States. In 2004, 2005, Taylor's job was the coordinator of Iraqi reconstruction. What the hell did we reconstruct there? Nothing. There's stories instead of pallets of dollars that were sent over there supposedly for reconstruction, which disappeared. What can Taylor tell us about that if he's so concerned with corruption? In 2011 to 2013, Taylor's job was coordinator of transitions of the Arab Spring, which means he was working to try and put terrorists in control of Arab nations that were targeted for regime change by the deep state. He worked very closely as ambassador to Ukraine, with John McCain's aide, David Kramer, the person who brought the Steele report to the United States. So this is a guy who's up to his eyeballs in the coup against President Trump. Then you look at George Kent, the other guy who was promoted last week. Kent was the senior anti-corruption coordinator of the State Department Europe Bureau. Well, there's no place more corrupt than what's going on in Europe now with the stealing of people's assets, the destruction of nations under the European Union policy. And in Eastern Europe, the same kind of continuing looting of the population. Now, then Kent actually said in the hearings that the Maidan coup in February 2014 was the equivalent of the US Minutemen in the American Revolution. So he's comparing neo-Nazi militia who shot and killed policemen and demonstrators with the American militia that fought the American Revolution. This guy is a complete liar. This guy Vindman, he's a National Security Council interagency cutout tied in with the CIA. Yovanovitch, everywhere she's been, and Trump is absolutely right about this. In Armenia, she presided over the launching of a new war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. One of the things she did in Ukraine was set up an operation to monitor journalists in Ukraine to see who was reporting favorably about Trump. So these are people who are opposed to the election of Zelensky. They don't like the new president of Ukraine. Why? Because they want a war to continue in Ukraine. And I think it's important to note that Trump never really supported the idea of providing lethal weapons to Ukraine, because he sees this as part of the continuation of the post-Cold War confrontation with Russia. And so he's trying to work with President Zelensky to make sure that we can back away from the confrontation in eastern Ukraine between pro-Russian and Ukrainian forces. That's what Zelensky's trying to do. But the friends of George Kent, who he calls the equivalent of the American militia at the time of the American Revolution, they were the ones who went in and launched the killing. They're the neo-Nazi brigades. So this is something the Republicans have to bring out, because what we're seeing is not honest diplomats, but the hardcore, corrupt, deep state, permanent bureaucracy that Trump knows is the swamp. And this is who is being treated by the media as the great heroes of the Ukraine impeachment hearings.
Yeah, it's such a banana republic show trial. Honestly, Harley, it's just beyond the pale. William Taylor, no firsthand knowledge of anything regarding the call. Yovanovitch, no firsthand knowledge of anything regarding the call. George Kent, what's he know? Nothing. Nobody knows anything. Meanwhile, we have Joe Biden bragging in front of the Council on Foreign Relations about his quid pro quo in the Ukraine.
I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Bragging openly that he got the Ukrainian prosecutor fired by threatening to withhold $1 billion in military aid. Bragging about it in front of the deep state CFR. You're not going to hear about that from CNN. They're going to omit that truth. Meanwhile, sitting over this entire Banana Republic show trial is Adam Schiff. Let me play this soundbite for you from Representative Elise Stefanik, who just nails it.
So this was day 2 of an abject failure of Adam Schiff and his regime of secrecy. As we saw today, he is making up the rules as he goes. He did not let Republicans put forth any unanimous consents. He did not let us control our own time, Republican members' time. I think I was interrupted about 6 times throughout the hearing. So this is just more of the ridiculous abuse of power that we're seeing from Adam Schiff. I think one of the most important facts that came across today, Ambassador Yovanovitch testified that the president can appoint ambassadors at will. That is important. The president has a right to pick who his or her ambassadors are. And then in my line of questioning, I just wanted to highlight the Obama State Department was so concerned about conflicts of interest with Hunter Biden sitting on Burisma's board that the Obama State Department, that was the first instance where Ambassador Yovanovitch had ever heard the word Burisma. That's an important fact to note for all of the viewers here today. So we're going to continue asking about Hunter Biden's role on Burisma on behalf of the millions of Americans who want to know the answer to that question.
And there's the real meddling in the Ukraine. Isn't that the funny punchline to this story? The Democrats are up to their eyeballs in corruption. And she said something very important there. She talked about Adam Schiff's abuse of power. When they're going after this president for him abusing his power, the entire thing is an absolute show trial. It's black is white, it's upside down world, it's clown world, Harley.
Well, I want to go back to this question for a moment of what this deep state crowd that's going after Trump presided over after the fall of the Soviet Union. They looted not just Russia, but looted Ukraine. Ukraine at one point was the 6th largest industrial economy, when the top 10 industrial economies in the world. In 1991, they had 52 million people. Today, they have 30 million. They've had a brain drain. They've had people die early. Their GDP is at 2/3 today what it was during the period of when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Ukraine is 42nd of all 42 European nations in purchasing power. Wages have collapsed. The average wage, or the per capita GDP rather, globally is $11,700. In Ukraine, it's $2,800. In 1991, for example, they produced 250 planes in their factories. 2018, 0 planes. So you have a complete destruction of an economy under the auspices of people like Kent and Taylor and Jovanovic, who then brought in a Nazi regime, a corrupt regime under Poroshenko. And the Ukrainian people finally rejected it, brought in Zelensky. And Zelensky wants to work with Trump. When he was asked, do you feel pressure? He said, no. And now they're trying to say, well, it's because he didn't know what was going on. They're trying to make him seem like some kind of a sap. But he absolutely understands that he needs Trump if he's going to avoid ending up with more fighting in eastern Ukraine. The people who are pushing to get rid of Trump are the same people who wanted to have a confrontation with Russia in Syria, the same people who were covering up Benghazi. You know, when you talk about Hillary's lies, go back to Benghazi and you see the perfect example of that. This is the regime change crowd. This is the coup crowd. And they're still trying to pull off a coup in the United States. And we've got to take off the gloves on this. And, you know, Joe Biden was the point man for this in the Obama administration. The story is now coming out that Brennan was working on the Russiagate story at the end of 2015 when Trump first got into the campaign. That you have so much evidence of this in-depth corruption, which they say, well, we're not going to look at it because Mueller already proved that the Russians intervened. No, he didn't prove it. And there's a lot of evidence that it was Ukrainian networks that were the ones doing the intervention in 2016. And we haven't even mentioned people like Alexandra Chalupa, who is tied to this guy whose name, if you mention, you probably get thrown off YouTube, the so-called whistleblower. But you know, here you have just evidence after evidence of the corruption. And some of it's out there, but I think someone has to put together the story. Someone in the Republicans has to say, why are you diplomats covering up for a Nazi coup that's destroying Ukraine? Is this what we mean by human rights? And of course, this crowd, in the name of human rights, destroyed Libya. They tried to destroy Syria. They destroyed Iraq. So I think the evidence is very much on the side of Donald Trump, but we've got to get tougher with it.
I want to ask your opinion about the Horowitz report. I want to ask your opinion about AG Barr. I want to ask your opinion about how does this all shake out? We are down to the final year of this presidency if the Democrats are allowed to steal the next election. They may not be. They couldn't steal the last one. Maybe they can't steal this next one either. But according to the polls, even coming out from Fox News, these fixed, idiotic polls, every single Democratic presidential candidate is outpolling President Trump by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points. Every single one. It's absolute lunacy in their fake polls, Harley.
Sean, the reason I don't trust any of those is when Democrats are asked who they support, none of them support any of the people.
That's right.
You know, they're all around 20%. So none of these candidates have inspired the Democratic Party base. They're just trying to whip up a line that Trump is collapsing in the polls, and therefore the Republican senators should go ahead and vote to convict after the House Railroad impeaches Trump. Now, I want to bring up another point here, which is you had these 3 gubernatorial elections, and the one in Kentucky, Trump actually brought this candidate, the governor of Kentucky, who's very unpopular, brought him back from 17 points behind to within a half a point. And instead of that being seen as Trump still has support, it's supposedly an example that he's lost support.
They spun the narrative. That's right. Yeah. Trump couldn't get this guy elected. I didn't know he was down that far, 17 points behind.
17 points 10 days before the election.
Wow.
Because he went out and attacked the teachers. He called the teachers a bunch of freeloaders.
Well,
and that was popular.
Yeah, it's not popular to speak truth. These teachers unions are out of control. Did you see what just went down in Chicago? These teachers unions are going to destroy this country by having their demands met, which evidently is what happened in Chicago.
Well, and then you have in Louisiana, you have a Democratic governor who's actually far more conservative than any of the Democrats in the Congress. And he beat about the number 4 choice on the Republican side for governor. again, in a very close race. So the idea that these are proving to Republicans that Trump is a loser, you got to get away from him, it's an attempt to manipulate through use of polls. And I think the contrast is whenever a Democratic candidate goes and speaks somewhere, if they can draw a crowd larger than a telephone booth, it's newsworthy. Trump goes and does these rallies with 20,000 in the hall and 30,000 outside the hall, and that's just taken as an example that white racist nationalists were having a pep rally for guns. The lying is unbelievable, but the people who are turning out don't believe the lies. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that we could go on for another hour on all the lies and the corruption of the media and so on. But the most evident point here is that Donald Trump pulled off a coup of his own by ending the Syrian civil war and by doing it through diplomacy. All these guys say Trump's ignorant, he's undiplomatic, he can't do anything. He stopped a civil war that was run by Hillary and Obama. And he stopped it to save lives of Muslims, of Christians, of Jews in the Middle East. He intends to do that with the North Korea situation. He intends to resolve the Ukraine situation. And these guys who are attacking him are the people who support these wars. And the fact that Trump is now identifying his opponents as the military-industrial complex is key. Because remember, after Eisenhower did that, and Eisenhower and MacArthur talked to Kennedy and warned Kennedy about these networks in the permanent bureaucracy, and Kennedy started to try and move against them, they killed Kennedy. Well, Trump is openly moving to expose these networks. But I think he has to go that one step further and basically say to Adam Schiff, why are you defending diplomats who put a neo-Nazi regime into power in Ukraine?
I want to play a soundbite for you here. I've played this before, but it warrants mentioning again that the deep state that we talk about, the shadow government, the intelligence agencies, the CIA, this entire apparatus aligned against President Donald Trump was really brought out again into the light by Margaret Brennan. Now, Margaret Brennan, who is the current moderator of Face the Nation on CBS, a mockingbird to her core. She's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. She was talking to former CIA Director John McLaughlin and John Brennan, and she asked them this. Listen to the response from McLaughlin.
You'd have to agree that now the impeachment inquiry is underway, sparked by a complaint from someone within the intelligence community. It feeds the president's concern and often used term about a deep state being there to take him out.
Thank God for the deep state.
And the sycophants all applaud and laugh. The deep state. Thank God. Their work is so honorable, Harley. He goes on to basically say that. They're doing honorable, higher power work. Who are they serving? They're not serving the Constitution. Well, we all know this. Who are they serving, Harley?
Get the last laugh. And you brought up earlier, you asked about Barr and Durham, their investigation, the Horowitz investigation. I think the reason that Schiff is in such a hyperbolic frenzy to push this thing through is precisely because when the Durham report comes out, it's going to show that it was British intelligence working with a section of Italian intelligence, with the Ukrainians, with a section of the Australian, the old Five Eyes networks of the British, and working on the inside were the Obama team of Brennan and Clapper, but also people like Susan Rice, the whole shebang of this grouping, including the whole corrupt FBI apparatus of Comey and Strzok and McCabe. This is what's going to come out. Now, it's got to come out quickly. The problem is that they want to make sure they pin it down fully, because they know that you're going to get blowback from the media, which is really nothing but the PR for the shadow government, and especially then from Brennan and others. We saw this with Brennan, and this is where you see someone who says, thank God for the deep state. What a moron. When Dianne Feinstein, who's not the greatest person in the world, had her Senate investigative team looking into Brennan's support for torture at the CIA, Brennan's CIA hacked the computers of the Senate committee, which was later acknowledged that that happened. Now, the CIA is not supposed to be engaged in any domestic operation. Brennan's fingerprints are all over every aspect of the anti-Trump operation. So this in itself is breaking the law. But then you look at what are they doing this for? They're doing this to preserve a collapsing financial system and a collapsing geopolitical strategic doctrine, which, if they succeeded, would either impose a top-down global bankers dictatorship, which would probably kill off half the world's population through austerity, or would lead to nuclear war. And so, again, what they're doing is supporting a completely unpopular globalist regime. And Trump has the issues on his side, but he's got to make it clear to people that his fight is with this Wall Street, City of London, Brussels bureaucracy that's trying to take away our constitutional rights, take away the right of sovereignty of every other nation. And by the way, I was just at a conference and I heard some very interesting African delegates at the conference who were saying, thank God for Donald Trump, because he's the only one who went to the United Nations and said he supports the sovereignty of every nation. And these Africans were saying, look, under Obama was promoting the same old British colonialism of the International Monetary Fund. And so it's interesting. Much of the world is moving away from what we in the United States are told is the good, honest approach to government. And so many Americans now know it's not true, but we've got to be more aggressive in our countering this.
All right. Well, I guess we can leave people with the good news. You know, you mentioned Durham. I mentioned AG Barr. This comes from James Howard Kunstler over at kunstler.com. Anyone who doubts that the Attorney General is dead serious about cleaning up the goddamn mess of sedition spawned by the Democratic Party, its agents in the permanent Washington bureaucracy, and its public relation arm in the news media might invest a little time and attention into William Barr's speech to the Federalist Society Friday evening. Mr. Barr declared unambiguously and in plain English that, quote, in waging a scorched earth, no holds barred war of resistance against this administration, it is the left that is engaged in the systemic shredding of norms and undermining of the rule of law. Our hope is in the Constitution and the rule of law. Our hope is in white hats actually handing down indictments and seeing perp walks, Harley. That's where the hope lies, and we have 1 year left.
It's also in the goodwill and good sense of the American people, because if you go back to the real tradition of our revolution, it was a fight against injustice. It was a fight against an empire. And Trump is reasserting the idea of the United States as a sovereign republic. And if Americans know enough about their history to realize that that's what this fight is about, then they'll be out in the streets. And I think that's why I say that it's so important that these issues be clarified. And I'd like to offer your listeners a chance to be in contact with me through my personal email, and I'll send them a link to my blog page where I write about these issues, 2 or 3 times a week now. You can get a link to my personal blog by writing to me at harleysch@gmail.com. That's harleysch@gmail.com. And Sean, I'm already in contact with a lot of your listeners and supporters who really appreciate the work that you do. And they ask, what more can I do? And I keep telling them, back Sean, back LaRouche PAC, get into the fight, including in the election campaign.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do not stand down. Do not stand down. That's what they want us to do. They want us to think our vote doesn't count, our voice doesn't matter. We can't possibly defeat this deep state, which is now so out in the open, Harley. They've really exposed their soft underbelly. They really have exposed themselves at this point. And it wasn't that long ago you and I would have conversations and people would call us crackpots for even mentioning a deep state. Now they label themselves that.
It's not a deep state anymore. It's now on the surface.
Yeah, it's a shallow state, a shallow shadow government. Well, you guys do such important work over there at LaRouche. A shout out for your special report. CO2 reduction is a mass murder policy. Guys, it's so important that people know this information. It's so, so important because as I've said and will continue to say, We got to shout this from the rooftops. United Nations Agenda 2030, previously known as UN Agenda 21, is the death knell for humanity if we allow these people to push forward this anti-human agenda, which is to remove all our current forms of energy and replace them with solar and wind, which cannot work. It does not work. You can't power cities with solar and wind, but they know that. So the goal is to reduce our living standards to that of the third world, and thereby we're all equal, right, Harley?
And Sean, if you want to see an example, look what they did to Ukraine. That's what they intend to do to the United States.
All right. Well, Harley, thank you so much for your voice. You're such a beacon of truth and such a smart guy. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Sean. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate it. Thank you so much to my patrons who are keeping us in this fight for truth, regardless of what YouTube does with their monetization policies. Thank you so much for listening, guys. If this information resonates with you, please do share it and give it a like. God bless you all. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful week ahead. Oh, and for real news 24/7, you can always visit us at sgtreport.com, the corporate propaganda antidote. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Real disclosure is when a Christian breaks down what this actually is. We're dealing with deception. What the world is calling disclosure, it is going to be the great lie that is going to lead people astray.